Welcome, everybody. This is the 2025 iteration of the Grad School Information Session. It's something that we do around this time every year, and it is hopefully going to provide information that's useful to students who are close to thinking about applying to grad school and ones who are just considering it, haven't given it a lot of thought yet. So I will be dropping a link into the chat in a moment, and if you all could sign in, all the attendees could sign in and put your email and address and name in so I could follow up with you afterwards. But I will be recording the entire 2 hours, and the video will be eventually posted on the PNN website, and I'll publicize that fact when it's available. But that lets people who are studying abroad or doing whatever, to look at it at their leisure afterwards. So again, we are recording. I want to make that clear to those of you who, want to have your video on or off as we're talking. But if we get to Q&A, I hope that you'll turn on your video. I hope you'll consider turning on your video as you're asking questions. Obviously, that's your choice. I'll be monitoring the chat also, and kind of if you want to ask questions there instead, and I'll try to bring your questions to the panelists if they don't notice them. But we're very pleased to have 5 faculty members with us tonight. So Dr. Sarah Gaither, I'm going in alphabetical order, of course, Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, Dr. Timothy Strauman, Dr. Makeba Wilbourn, and Dr. Christina Williams. And so thank you so much for making time for this. A lot of you're veterans at this particular event and have given so much useful information to our students previously. But all of these faculty represent the 5 graduate training areas at Duke, and that approximates a lot of graduate programs. So if we could get started, panelists, if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourselves, and if you want to pitch a class that you might be teaching in spring, that also would be fine. Say anything else you want about yourself, and eventually, and if you want to do this now, that's great, but talking about the kinds of programs that are available to people who are interested in your training area, that'd be lovely, and then we can kind of go from there. So how about Dr. Williams?
Okay. Yes. So I'm Christina Williams. I'm actually a professor emerita, which means that I had retired last year, but they've drafted me back to this event since I've been doing it for many years. I'm a neuroscientist and I'm part of this department. I'm not currently doing any research, although I'm greatly enjoying retirement on the coast, on the north coast of Massachusetts, where I can see water and birds and all kinds of wildlife all of the time. But neuroscience graduate programs in general take a lot of forms. And so if you're interested in the neurosciences, either doing research with human beings or with more cell and molecular research with animals, getting more at mechanisms of brain function, you can apply to psychology departments, much like the one here at Duke, which has a number of different training areas, including one in the neuroscience area. Actually, a couple in the neuroscience area, both an animal and a human one. And also, there are neuroscience programs that take other forms. And so there are neuroscience programs that span a number of different departments, often including some departments in medical centers. And those tend to be more integrative programs, very often very large numbers of faculty are involved. And you get admitted and you usually rotate around to a number of different labs before kind of picking a mentor in a lab that you want to work in. And then there are other programs, much like our cognitive neuroscience training program that's here at Duke, which also involves a number of faculty in a lot of different departments, where you get admitted into a program, but depending upon what advisor you end up working with, that's the department that you'll end up getting your PhD in. So you could be getting a PhD in a biology department or in a medical school department or in a psychology department. It just depends on who you end up doing work with. And I should say that the other difference, the big difference between these programs is that when you generally work in a psychology department, you often and most likely will identify a mentor before you start and interact with that person and get admitted directly into a lab so you can get started doing research right away in your preferred area. Whereas these other programs, you tend to do rotations. And there's some advantages to that if you have a number of faculty that are of interest to you. But in the end, it's kind of like a dating game, meaning you do have to have a faculty member who wants to have you in the lab as well as you want to be in their lab. And if they don't want you in the lab because they're either filled up or they don't think you're a good fit, you'll have to look elsewhere. So there's no guarantee that you get to work with whomever you would like to work with. So there are advantages and disadvantages to each of the programs, and I'm happy to talk more about them, but I'll let the next faculty member talk about their area.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Gaither? Oops.
I'm here. Yes. Hi, everyone. You might think I'm here to represent developmental psychology by my two twins who have shown up behind me, and they may make another appearance, just to warn you. They are very intrigued by mommy's work. But I'm here to represent the social psychology area. I believe if you've ever taken any of my 104 classes, I know some of you on this call have, so thank you for sticking with me in my class. Really, social psychology is how we study people's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and how they're shaped by the real or imagined presence of others. I think we're all social psychologists, no matter what it is we study or major in here at Duke, because we're all judging people in some way, shape, or form. Really, social psychology at its core, in my view, is studying why we do what we do and the role that context play in shaping those behaviors and decisions. There's lots of branches of social psychology, and if you've only been exposed to social psych here at Duke, we only represent a small fraction, I think, of the things you can study in social psychology. There's a whole branch on decision making, which some people actually do more of in the cognitive area in our department than in the social psych area. There's morality. There's also social relationships, romantic relationships, which is a big area we don't have in our department, but that is another branch of social psychology. Obviously, I study a lot of stereotyping, prejudice, face perception, social cognition kind of choices as it relates to those things. But I think for anyone who's interested in looking for a user experience type job, some people might use a PhD in social psychology to go into landscapes like Instagram or Google or things of that nature, to figure out what types of marketing messages may work better or worse, for example. Other people would use a social psych degree and go into policy. A lot of people go work for the census or Pew or things of that nature. Of course, some people also choose to stay in academia and become professors, but I do think the social psychology PhD is pretty versatile. Some of the programs are more experimental than others. We're pretty experimentally heavy here at Duke. So depending on what types of methods you're interested in, those things can vary from social psych program to social psych program. I think other things that you can study in social psychology compared to some of the other areas, political science, political psychology falls into our area, gender and sexuality studies, those kinds of things all fall into social psychology. So it's pretty broad. Which is also why I kind of feel like areas don't always matter, except for when you're applying to graduate school, which is the weird thing. I recruit kids, even though I'm a social psychologist. So I encourage you all to find your mentor fit based on what they study, and then see if that person, it happens to fall in the areas. You'll hear from Tim later. It's a little different for clinical PhD applicants compared to some of these other areas, but broadly, as long as you can find a mentor, that's a good fit for you. And I think social psych is pretty versatile, which is a big reason I ended up choosing that over developmental. No offense, Makeba, when I was deciding between PhD programs myself. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Dr. Wilbourn?
Well, I felt like I was getting some shout outs, so I was excited to follow. I'm Makeba Wilbourn, developmental psychologist. I'm in the developmental area. So, developmental psychology is the study of change over time, the process of change over time. People often have misconceptions that it's just studying kids, and that is not, in fact, the case. So, it's very broad. And so you can go to a traditional psychology department like we have that has a developmental area and a developmental group. But you can also, I got my PhD from Cornell, which is the Department of Human Development. And in that department, we had sociologists, gerontologists, historians, and it was very interdisciplinary. And we all were focused at looking at the process of change over time and from basically infancy through the end of the lifespan. So certain places you can go to a human development department, a applied development. Sometimes these programs are housed in schools of education at times. Sometimes they're standalone. There's also, again, schools of education often have these sort of offshoots. And so it's really about the school's history and the way they came to having the study of change over time and often focused on kids. So, for example, at Cornell, we had very famous Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who his whole model is about looking at all aspects that affect the child. So it's no surprise that the department that he really was fundamental in shaping mirrored that theory. There was a psychology department that had like one person who did like baby stuff, but if you wanted to get your degree in developmental, you only could get that from our department. So, really looking at the school and looking at sort of where the person you want to work with is housed. That's, again, I'm going to echo what my colleagues have said, that it's really focused on the work that the person is doing. Don't focus on the caliber of the school or the specific department. It's more, does this person's research interest and program of research fit you? And where they do that is less valuable than the fit that you have within their research. So I'm happy to talk more about it. If people, we also have our students will go into school policy, public policy. We had students who have worked for IES, that's the Institute for Educational Sciences, which, I don't know if they have jobs at the moment, but there's lots of different ways evaluating programs. You have lots of different pathways. And even if you are inclined in like sort of the medical or the health, so if we look at like Jerry Dawson and other folks who are both like clinical, but do work in developmental areas. So if you do think about maybe being pre-med or wanting to work in a more sort of health-based field, there's lots of need for developmental psychologists. Even in legal fields, we think about eyewitness testimony in court cases, et cetera. So there's lots of different things you can do, not just solely focusing on, doing research in a lab.
Well, thank you. Dr. Strauman, your turn.
Hi, I'm Tim Strauman. I'm a clinical psychologist. I mostly study things like the treatment and etiology of depression. Let's see, what do you need to know? Many people who want to go into clinical psychology are interested in being service providers. And so in that sense, it's a somewhat different set of goals and a somewhat different process than someone who is interested in doing what I do, which is I am a service provider, I am a licensed clinical psychologist, but I'm also an academic researcher and a teacher. So people who are interested in clinical psychology, broadly speaking, are going to find that there are one of three pathways that are going to work for them. The first one is a PhD route, which is very much like what you've already heard described in other areas, with the addition of particular courses and particular training experiences that are necessary to qualify for licensure. And there are steps that come after graduate school for licensure in clinical psychology as well. Many PhD programs in clinical psychology are very research oriented, like we are. So all of our faculty here are active in different kinds of research. All of our graduate students are active in research labs. They're publishing, they're collecting data, they're doing the things that a PhD student in psychology should be doing. And in addition to that, they are getting the training experiences that will hopefully allow them to go on and get licensed should they decide to do that. There are PhD programs that are not especially research oriented, but they're still PhD programs. So you will still do a dissertation, you still take a range of courses, but the atmosphere of the department may not be quite as consistently research focused as a place like Duke is. So that's one route. Another route is the so-called Doctor of Psychology degree, the PsyD. And the intent of that degree originally was to sort of mirror what medical school was. So the idea was this was really professional training, not academic training. And while there was a lot of overlap in the content, the goal of the PsyD program was to create practitioners who would then go out into the workforce, and that would be what they would do. They would not be representing themselves as having acquired skill in research, et cetera, et cetera. PsyD programs, to be honest, are a mixed bag. There are some that are absolutely outstanding. There are some that are for profit, and you can kind of draw your own conclusions about what kind of environment that might create. Typically, one of the big differences between PhD programs and PsyD programs is PsyD programs often don't have a lot of financial aid. So whereas any student that we take in any of our areas here, we're going to take with a guarantee of being able to provide a certain amount of financial support for them. There are PsyD programs that won't do that, and that can become very expensive. There is now a third route to becoming a psychological practitioner, and this is the first year I've really talked about it here, and that is, it's very clear from where organized psychology is going that states want master's level licensed psychology practitioners, and they're willing to actually change their licensing laws in order to make that happen. So we were starting to see, not just in North Carolina, but in other states, programs that are 2.5 years, where the goal is to get a master's degree in psychology with a specialty in clinical psychology. And that, of course, includes, substantive didactic training as well as clinical intervention training. The idea there is actually very similar to what a PsyD program was intended to do, which is to create a workforce who are people who have the skills, know how to do the interventions, don't want to be teaching, don't want to be mentoring graduate students, don't want to be doing research, want to be full-time out in the field. And I think you'll find that those programs are going to start to appear in lots of different places. There'll be, I think, lots of excellent departments of psychology that will continue to have their PhD programs, but will also decide they want to do this kind of training as well. It's a little bit early to know what that will cost. It's a little bit early to know exactly what the job opportunities will be, and the state licensing laws are all going to have to change in order for, or most are going to have to change in order for master's level people to qualify for licensure. You can practice in psychology in North Carolina with a master's degree, but your title is psychological associate. And there's a particular training and supervisory set of requirements there. But you're practicing clinical psychologist, you just have a master's degree. So those are the three ways to get into this line of work. And I'll be happy to answer questions about what the different nuances are. And thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Marsh?
Hey, my graduate training area is called Cognition in the Brain, and it really kind of blends two distinct training areas in the sense that of cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience. I'm a cognitive psychologist, and the difference between the two is really more of method, although they are very different communities in terms of what conferences they go to, what journals they publish in. Both cognitive psychologists and cognitive neuroscientists are interested in the mind, how people think, how people, interpret what they see, what they attend to, how they categorize the world, what they remember, the decisions they make. A cognitive psychologist is kind of a different level of analysis from a neuroimager who might use tools like fMRI or TMS or other kinds of techniques to try to get an insight into how the human brain is supporting cognition, whereas a cognitive psychologist might be more interested in behavioral measures and going out in the world. As a cognitive psychologist, in some ways, I have more overlap with the social psychologists and the developmental psychologists than some of my wonderful neuroscience colleagues. So it's just important when you look at a cognitive program to kind of figure out, does it do both? Is the strength in one over the other? Because depending on what you're interested in, if you want to do a traditional cog psych program, if you apply to a program where everyone is imaging, that's not going to be a good fit. And many problems that are of interest to cognitive psychologists these days, like misinformation and debunking, are, as Dr. Gaither and Dr. Wilbourn already both mentioned, ones that could be in multiple areas, because a social psychologist might also ask and answer those questions, as might someone in the business school. So I don't want to say a lot more other than saying our graduates often go on to academia, but also very commonly, my students have gone to Instagram, Google, Microsoft, Merck, kind of two categories of pathways: user experience and data analytics. We people get great jobs. It's just a matter of what they feel like they're interested in doing next. So I'll just stop there.
Well, thank you. Just a reminder that we're kind of to Q&A as far as I'm concerned. If people want to, kind of put their hand up or, put themselves on screen and ask a question, that's great. Or you can throw a question into chat and we'll try to get your questions answered. But while we're waiting for people to do that, I'm wondering if we should just start talking about what it is that you look for or have looked for prospective grads for your labs. What are the things that you value that you recommend that people aspire to as they're approaching application? I don't know who wants to start.
I can jump in first. All my children are not technically here, so we'll see what happens. I think, one piece of advice, which you'll get from everyone, I think, is to either check the websites of any program you're thinking of applying to and seeing if the given faculty member you have overlap with is accepting students. Some websites are more updated than others. So the other option is to email a faculty member in advance to see if they're considering students, because you don't want to waste your time applying to a program, paying the application fees, all of those things if that faculty member isn't taking in students. And there's lots of reasons they might not be. They don't have funding, their lab's too big, all of those things. So the first thing you always want to do is to figure that out. If you do email faculty, I will tell you the things that annoy me is when I get these very long life stories from students saying, and then at the bottom, are you taking students next year? You do not need to tell anyone your life story. Just give them a short who you are. You can attach your CV if you want. Honestly, I never open anyone's CVs when they send it to me. Say, I'm interested in applying for your program and seeing if you're accepting students next year. I really love your work on X, Y, and Z. And that's a really good way to put your name in their inbox. You guys want to say hi? No? Okay. The thing that I look for always is overall fit, right? So they have to have overlap with me. They also, I don't want them to be a clone of me is the other thing. So if you want to study something that's exactly like what I do, that's not going to be exciting enough for me as a faculty member to want to take you on. But it also can't be something so distant from what I do that I don't feel like I can be a proper mentor for you. So that fit is really clear for me and looking at applicants. And then also what experiences you have. You have to sell yourself. And this is my biggest thing with Duke undergrads when I work with them. You are all in the top 5% of applicants. You're clearly already amazing by being at Duke. However, one skill set I think you all struggle with a little bit is selling your skill sets. So really getting advice on those application statements before you submit them so that it's really clear what unique things you have done. And I promise you have done plenty. Don't use the word "I'm passionate about psychology," please, in your essay. That's my other cringe sentence I read in applications. I know you have passion. Use a thesaurus, please. ChatGPT is your friend for synonyms now these days. So those are some of the things that I always look for in my applicants.
And if I could jump in, I would just say that work experience, like many of our applicants have worked full-time in a lab. And if you think about someone who's worked in a lab and gotten specific skills and have publications, that's tough to beat if you're coming straight out of undergrad. That's not to say we don't take people. Well, some programs take people straight out of undergrad, some don't. But it's just something to consider, especially if you're not sure if this is what you want to do. People who work full-time for a year or 2, 3 years before applying to graduate school are generally much stronger applicants.
The other thing that I think that students need to think about is talking to faculty or anyone that you've done research with to get good recommendations, because we do take the recommendations very seriously. And just having a recommendation from a faculty member whose course you've done well in is really not what we're looking for. We can tell that you got an A in that class, and so we know you did well in it. And so that isn't something that we are particularly interested in, but we are interested in a research mentor if you've done a senior thesis or you've done independent work or you've worked over the summer in someone's lab. We're really interested. And so a good thing to do is to get to know the faculty member that you're working with. Take them, flunch them, and go and have lunch with them. Tell them a little bit about your interests. Try to get input from them about where they would apply to graduate school if they were interested in the things that you were interested in. Try to engage some faculty members so that they get to know you and can write a really strong letter that really talks about not only the fact that you did well in X, Y, and Z, but that you have strong motivation, that you have interests in certain kinds of things, that you've had kinds of experiences. They can reinforce things that you've said in your statement by saying, oh, she's not only can do this data analysis or this technique, but I've seen her at work doing it, and I've been so impressed at how quickly she can pick up technical information. Things like that are really valuable to us to know that another faculty member can essentially vouch for your skill set. And that's the kind of thing that we're really looking for in many cases. I could also add that I think Sarah said it well, but your statement that they ask you should really be about your reasons for wanting to go to graduate school and your technical experience. It's sort of more like applying for a job than it is applying to be an undergraduate at Duke. We're not interested in these statements about, how you did well in volleyball or how you had sort of some experience when you were 4 years old. We're interested in what you've done in college, what you've done in the summers, the kinds of things to essentially enrich the resume that you're going to send along with your application, but to kind of fill out the details of how did you get interested in this particular line of work? What is it about it that floats your boat? What is it in coursework that got you intrigued? What questions are you interested in? How do you think you're a good fit for this program or this researcher that you're applying to work with? Those are the kinds of things that we want to see in these statements, rather than anything about your personal life. We're not really all that interested in sort of the kinds of things that you might have put in a personal statement for applying to college.
Just to follow up on what Dr. Williams is saying, think of it as you are applying to become a member of the scientific community. And so what information is relevant about that? Certainly, it's nice to know that you have a passion for doing science when we sort of assume that. But what would be the things if you were looking to identify the next generation of outstanding scientists? What would you want to know about people? You'd want to know what experience have they already had? How do they know they like it? Can they get somebody who is sorry, there's a yowling cat in the back. I don't think you can hear them, but she's very unhappy. Anyway, clearly it's dinner time. Good heavens, kitty cat. She clearly didn't get into graduate school. She wants to know why not. Anyway, you are applying to be a member of the scientific community. And so when in stating what your qualifications are, you want to be able to say, it's not just that I look good on paper in my coursework. It's that I have taken the time to learn different skills. I've gotten to know different faculty members. I've gotten to know graduate students and helped them with their research, and in doing so, gotten a chance to acquire a skill set. So think of it that way. It really is much closer to a job application than it is to a college application. And I think the people who are most successful are people who get mentored enough in the application process that they're able to come through that way rather than coming through as what you would think a more holistic approach would be the right one. But in this case, I'm not convinced that it is.
Yeah, I want to sort of echo what all of my colleagues have been really emphasizing. I think the important part is when we see applicants, they often have questions of like, what other schools are you applying to? And this is actually very telling. So if, Dr. Gaither's a leading scholar who studies, multiracial and biracial identities, and you list, Yale, Harvard, Penn, and there's really no one else doing the kind of work that Dr. Gaither's doing, that's a signal that your strategy is to try to find the sort of elite school, the strategy you might have used as an undergrad, as opposed to really knowing who's doing what in the field. So again, this is where you can use ChatGPT if you needed, but like who are the top 5 people doing research on this? Now, one way you can do that is you read Dr. Gaither's paper and you see who she cites, and then you see who they cite. And that's a way. So if you were applying to Dr. Gaither, she would want to see that you are also applying to other people that she knows at whose University of Hawaii. She knows at who's at this university, because that shows that you've done the work, that you are not just using this strategy of I want to go into a fancy elite school, but that you're literally motivated and interested to work with people on this particular area. So that's one piece of advice, is that if you haven't done your homework, there are ways that we can see that in your application, which inherently tells us that either you have not gotten the mentorship to help you make these decisions, or that you're using a strategy that's actually one that's not predictive of a very positive or easier transition into grad school. And so those are the sorts of things where asking questions, having flunches, talking to faculty is going to be essential in helping you sort of know the unwritten socialization, the unwritten rules, but also the worst thing in the world is to work really hard to get into something that you actually don't want, or that's actually not good for you. And you're committing. I mean, you can always leave. I'm not saying like we got you, you can't go, but you're committing for 5 years to something. And, that whole, well, I've already done half of this, but if this isn't right for you, it's not a good fit, you have, not done yourself a service by not really taking the time. This is why we like gap years. The reason we like gap years is it gives you a little distance between the sort of socialization you had as a Duke student or whatever undergrad institution, and you've maybe worked, and ideally if you could get a job in a research lab, that's amazing, but those are not always easy. But also, don't don't think that if you don't have that research experience in a lab after graduation, that your experience in that gap year isn't valuable, because it is. If you, let's say I had a student who took a gap year and she worked on off-Broadway plays, doing the sort of business end and some of the promotion end. And when she then later applied to graduate school, she talked about how she was living her dream job in many ways, right? New York City, but she kept wanting to have these sort of questions answered about, she wanted to go in and look at sort of speech disorders and the toll it takes, whatever. But she used those 2 years to talk about how it just reaffirmed for her that this was really important to her and this is what she wanted to do. I think that was very valuable because it gave us, the people who were reviewing her, she has perspective. This is not something, impulsive, or her parents said this is what she has to do. This is something that she was enjoying her life and she really was passionate and wanted to come back and do this. So she was very sort of solidified that this was the path she wanted to go. So I guess my advice is don't think that any experience you have in between isn't going to be valuable. It's how you sell it. And like Dr. Williams said, how did it sort of get you to where you want to be, and what did you learn about yourself in the process? And that's really important for us to know how you came to this decision, because it gives us an idea of whether or not you're really got the thinking and you really know yourself well enough to get through the program.
I'll just chime in here and say questions. Do any of the attendees have questions? Turn on your camera, ask a question, or throw a question into the chat for our panelists. And maybe while we're waiting for that, it would be maybe helpful to hear about what kinds of ways that people can position themselves well by acquiring funding, perhaps even before getting into grad school. And I know that Dr. Marsh has talked about this before to our VIP students in the summer program. But are you willing to talk about that again?
Sure. Dr. Gaither is also very familiar with these funding options as well. The funding situation is a bit unpredictable right now. And the main source of funding, one of the major sources of funding for graduate students is the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. The call, as Dr. Gaither knows, was very late this year. They're doing fewer awards this year, and they are now limiting applications to people prior to graduate school and first-year graduate students. So I do think, though, that when I see people who have applied to that, it's another indicator to me, kind of in the way that Dr. Wilbourn says, you look at where else they're applying and it kind of shows, do they have a coherent set? When I see that someone has gone ahead and applied to the NSF RFP, it tells me they know how the game works and that they put in some time and effort and tried to make a research proposal. I believe the deadline this year is November 10th for psychology. And it is a lot of work, but I do think that it's a great thing that people can do. And I always encourage people to do it. Now, I know people vary dramatically in this, and this is probably going to make Dr. Gaither go, when I say this next bit, but I've actually even worked with some people before who wanted to come to Duke, but I didn't have funding, but I liked what they told me about them and helped them with their NSF GRFP. And I had it work out with a wonderful student once. So I do think, that people look twice if you end up with your own funding. Because then it doesn't cost them something, and that's particularly important in a time of tightening funds to universities. But I also think that most people won't have funding, but if you do, it's a way of standing out, and even if you don't have it, but you applied, it shows that you know kind of the game. And then there's other ones as well, like the DoD and the Russell's, not Russell Sage. What's the one for first gen? Is the Soros?
Soros, yeah. Soros
Yeah.
is another big one.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a bunch of them. I do think it's a good thing to do.
And for those of you who are maybe more health oriented, you're interested in clinical tracks, there are NIH post-bac training programs that often have a transition component for funding into grad school too. And those are excellent gap year opportunities that make you very competitive. So since NSF is no longer allowing clinical or health oriented students at all apply, looking into those NIH kind of transition post-bac programs is a really good option too.
Yeah, I want to second that. What often happens is, psychology is not a big world, and clinical psychology is not a big world. And our colleagues at NIH and Bethesda, who run labs there, want us to send them our best post-baccalaureate students. So we get to write letters of recommendation for the people who were doing research in our labs, who say, I want to know more about, if I really want to be a psychologist, this is a great way to do it. The NIH post-bac program is absolutely first rate. It really takes training seriously as well as opportunities. So anybody who works with me in my lab gets, let's just call it encouragement to apply for that program. And the interesting thing is, we as faculty members want our colleagues at NIH to send us their best people that they just trained, right? So now, from an equity standpoint, is that necessarily optimal? Well, you have to be careful because you don't want to make sure that you're excluding anyone on the basis of they didn't go to a famous university. But, within that kind of a constraint, we have been successful at Duke here in our department, PNN, of getting people connected with this NIH postbac program with NSF and so on. And they have been successful in getting their best people admitted as graduate students in programs like ours. So look very carefully, think about it. There are lots of opportunities out there. You can only become more qualified. There's nothing bad about taking time off. There's absolutely nothing bad about it. You can only become more qualified. And sometimes the way you become qualified, as Dr. Wilbourn was talking about, it can be very interesting and very counterintuitive and really generate a sense of excitement in your potential mentors. This is somebody who's got a really interesting outlook on life. Maybe I want them in my lab.
I wanted to mention, this is not about funding, but I wanted to mention a couple of things that students may not know. One of them is that in the broad neuroscience area, including cognitive neuroscience, faculty often are involved in multiple graduate programs within the same institution. So here at Duke, for instance, you can work with several faculty members through the cognitive neuroscience admitting program or through our department, for instance. At other schools, sometimes there are 3 different programs that faculty members take graduate students from. And so it is sometimes valuable to write to a potential mentor, and especially if you know that the school has multiple graduate programs, to ask them which program would be the best to apply through, because sometimes it's easier or there's more funding in one program versus another program, for instance. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, is that one of the other things is if you've identified a program in the broad area of neuroscience. I don't know that other areas really do this, but certainly in the neurosciences they do. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that we are always interested in students who have certain skills. And one of them is always a good background in statistics or data analysis. And another one is computer programming. Many areas require large data sets and or programming of equipment or materials in some fashion. And so students who come to graduate school with some of these skills don't have to rush to catch up in their first couple of years by learning some of these skills in order to do their research. And so, again, for those of you who are not seniors or further along in your college career, I really highly recommend, if you're thinking about graduate school in any area of psychology or neuroscience, thinking about getting some additional training in computer science and or data management, data analysis, statistics. These are all kinds of courses that are offered here at Duke. And I think it definitely improves the look of your CV and adds to your skill set, your toolbox, when you're applying to graduate school.
Just a reminder to the people attending, you can ask a question in chat. Don't be shy.
One more. So one thing that's actually changing this year, because I'm helping a couple people apply to PhD psychology programs right now, is some schools are now requiring the GRE again. Some schools are not. So another planning piece for all of you is to do your homework, as you've heard others say already, and figure out if your school does require the GRE or not, because that is more money, more time to study, all of those things. Not all schools, Duke is not requiring it yet, but Harvard, for example, just reinstated the policy this year. So all PhD applicants have to have the GRE score to apply to Harvard now. So one thing to keep in mind is another cost. In addition to application costs, I know when I applied to grad school, I did not realize it was going to cost me $2,000 because it's $50 to $100 per application. Some schools may have fee waivers, especially if you're a McNair scholar, things like that. Ready for bed soon. But do keep in mind there are these other financial costs, sending transcripts and those things that I know I personally was not prepared for when I applied to grad school.
So one comment in there, or one question in the chat is somebody's considering getting a master's in Europe and then coming back for grad school. Is that common, or is it looked down upon? Daniela's question.
I don't think it's common, but I think it would be possibly a strength, right? To have that diverse experience and to be able to reflect on being trained in a different country and what did you learn about, sort of the objective view and getting the kind of perspective and skill sets. So I personally, and my colleagues, I would love to hear from them. I think it could be actually a positive, and it's novel that students don't often do this. I had a student who left. It was a undergrad, and she went specifically to do an MBA in the UK. And her goal was, I want to be internationally trained in thinking about business, not just in the US. And she came back and has this very successful she's an entrepreneur, very successful. But for her, that sort of international perspective, looking at things from different markets and different, cultural views was very valuable for her. So I don't think it would be a negative, nor do I think it would be looked down on. But again, it's how you sell it in your statement and how it led you to wanting to apply to, X faculty member.
Yeah, and if I could just follow up on that, it's going to, of course, depend on what the master's is and where you do it. Like, I mean, I have a student who went and is getting a master's at Oxford, that's very relevant. And I think that's great. I would also say, though, that it depends on your field. Like, we don't typically in Cog Psych have people go get a master's and then apply for a PhD. They get the master's on the way to the PhD. So, like, it would be like, I don't want to say a waste, but like, you don't have to get a separate master's before you apply to a PhD program. So I think if there's a master's program you're excited about and it's not going to cost you money, fantastic. I love the global perspective. There are lots of terrific labs in Europe. But I also just want to remind people that sometimes you get the master's en route to the PhD.
We have another question from the chat, and Runzi is wondering if you preference students who say they want to be in academia after they're done.
Take this one. I personally don't. I think Duke is unique, though, in that a lot of our faculty are very open to non-academic jobs after a PhD. That is not the case with all faculty in all programs. There are definitely some faculty who don't want to waste their time training someone and having them leave the academy. That's something, unfortunately, you can't really know until you've maybe interviewed or talked to other current students while you're interviewing. So those are things that are important for you to judge. I will also say some grad students who start a PhD program think they want to stay in academia and then they change their mind, or vice versa. They come in thinking they want to go into industry and then they actually fall in love with teaching. So using that as your criteria to decide on a program, again, going with your gut and your instincts of what it feels like in training is what I would push you to consider.
In the clinical psychology area, it has become increasingly common for people to go out into industry. And honestly, it's like the difference between, in my role at Duke, I can have an influence on the lives of hundreds of people. Right? My former student, who is now at Google, has an influence on the lives of millions of people. And we're trying to do the same thing. While we're both trying to find the best, most efficient delivery realms or routes for treatments for depression. Right? Now, maybe at Google, she can't do the kind of basic research that I can do in my lab. And obviously, we would collaborate anyway. But there's something to be said for a so-called non-traditional role, someone who is trained as an independent scientist. I mean, the PhD is basically the insignia of you are a full-fledged member of the scientific community. You know what you're doing. You can run your own lab, and where that lab happens to be and where that operation happens to be, there are places outside of academia where literally millions of lives can be influenced, and you can be the person who does that. So please don't restrict your thinking to, if I want to get a PhD, it means I'm going to be in academia. If you love academia, so much the better. But there are many more opportunities now, and it's interesting to check out a potential mentor and see where are their students going. Even, the last 10 years are enough to get a sense of, have they ever trained somebody who is in a non-traditional career route? And you want to know that.
I agree. I wanted to, if it's okay, Dr. Vieth, to address the question about, is it too late? And I see that Dr. Gaither weighed in. So I actually am non-traditional. So I did my undergrad, took a year off to find myself, and then I did a master's. I did a terminal master's degree. There are pluses and minuses. I didn't even know really what research was. I went to a big, huge state school where I drove in, I drove out. So I was not ready at all for a PhD program. I didn't even know what a Vita was because I thought it was the Madonna movie. I'm also aging myself. And I went the whole semester, my first semester, my master's, like thinking I had to watch the movie because everyone kept talking about Evita. And so that tells you how little socialization. That's a very true story. You can ask my uh, master student mentor because I finally got the courage to say, why is everyone talking about the Madonna movie? And he looked at me and he handled it very well. But no one told me what a curriculum vitae was. I had no idea. So the master's program is really where I learned a lot. I did a ton of research in my master's program. And again, what I would recommend is going to one of the best master's programs where you can do research and take coursework. And yeah, I had to take out some student loans. Yeah, I did stats classes before I even took my first step at Cornell's campus. So what I'll say is it's not too late in that when I figured out that I love this, I was a lot older than people. But if I tried to do that sooner, I would have crashed and burned. There's just no way. So your path, your trajectory is your own. Again, the developmentalist, like this is your path. And if this is something you really are interested in doing, it doesn't matter how you get to it. So what I'll say is, if you feel like you're behind the ball, you can't be more behind than I was, and look where I am. So don't give up on the possibilities. And if you can get a research job, that's amazing. But if you do a master's program, use it like a buffet. Throw yourself in, try things, try to work in different labs. And that again makes you a better candidate because you're going to have, research skills. So I just want to sort of give you guys support, the folks who didn't know maybe until now. There's always room for you in this field. We need everyone who's motivated and willing to come and, the goal is we all kind of want to make the world a better place. Like that's one of the things. We all have this motivation to understand things with the goal of making things better. So don't give up and being creative and thinking about ways. When you get where you're going to go, you'll be ready. So this one path you have to know as soon as you get out of undergrad, that's just not true. It's yes, at elite schools, that's often what happens, but there are plenty of us who had less traditional paths that are doing what we love. So, come talk to us. Please come talk to me. I'm happy to talk about my path and give you ideas of ways that you can try to figure this out and gain skills at the same time.
Would just like to alert the people who are attending that the faculty panel's down to our last 5 or so minutes. So if you have a question that you want to address by the panelists, now's the time.
I had a quick question about applications, going back to what you guys had spoken on earlier. When it comes to looking and evaluating an application in terms of like your personal statement, your letters of rec, your CV, like experience, etc. Um, what would you say you are like valuing the highest? And in terms of who to ask for letters of recommendation, if you're coming off of a postbac, for example, like, is it still valid to include a rec letter from someone you worked with in undergrad, someone you had an internship with in undergrad, and your postbac person? And if you're coming straight out of undergrad, if you did most of your work with one person, do you have advice on how to navigate targeting other people to ask for recommendation letters?
You want to go ahead, Sarah? On that thesis committee. And that means that you already have someone that's going to know something about you and your work and that you're going to talk to. So I think it's worth thinking strategically about who else might I kind of build a relationship with so that I can get a letter from them. And if you are leaving for a while, you might check in and let people know that you're going to be reaching back out and that you're going to do a check-in and stay in touch with people. Um, and I would think it was very weird if someone did a post back and had no letters from undergrad. You know, we want to hear from those people that know you the best and can say something about your research experience.
In terms of what we look at in applications, I would say we probably look at some combination of factors that identify both your fit with the program and with the mentor. I mean, we're looking at the coursework you've taken, your letter of recommendation, your statement about your interests. Those are things that we find useful to try to figure out how did you get to this point? Would you be a good fit in our lab, in our program? So fit is really, really important because we're looking for graduate students who have stick-to-itiveness and who are likely to like us as well as us liking them, kind of thing. And then I'd say the second thing is that many programs do look at things like GRE scores and grades in various courses, not necessarily a grade in your Russian class if that's not a part of your thing. Or if in early on you thought you were going to go to medical school and you took organic chemistry and didn't do very well, but then went on and did all sorts of things. We don't really care about the different paths that you took early on that might have led to sort of dead ends, but had maybe drew you into this career. We're looking to see how you've done in coursework, for instance, and what kinds of courses you've taken. I mean, you're interested in social psychology or neuroscience. You know, what courses have you taken? Some courses in biology and neuroscience and brain. You know, like what have you kind of selected courses that are relevant to what you say your interests are, kind of thing. So we look at sort of a combination of factors to kind of get a sense of your creativity, your intellect, but also whether you're a good fit and whether you have the kind of stick-to-itiveness. In other words, we are assured that you know that you're choosing the right set of goals and the right program for you. And the closer that fit is, I think, the more likely we are to take your application really seriously.
I just want to echo academic, your major advisor also can be a person who, let's say you have a blemish or you were going to be pre-med and then you rerouted. That is a great person to write about. And in this role that I've done letters, I've talked about their approach to taking classes and difficult classes, how they rebounded when things went poorly, right? So as an academic advisor, I also can address like bad parts of the record. I can say things like, this is not a reflection, this student really was, and this is where instead of putting in your personal statement all of the difficulties, this is where a letter writer can say, there were a series of things that really were unfortunate that contributed to this. Now, I don't have to give detail, but man, did this kid, get back up and dust herself off. Those letters can be very powerful. So I am going to say you definitely want people who can speak to your research and your critical thinking, etc. But you also want someone who can speak to your growth from freshman year or when they first met you and can talk about trajectory, right? And that might be a research mentor, but that might also be a faculty you built a relationship with who you share a love of piano with. So someone who can speak to how you handle failure or when things go poorly, your mindset, your approach. Do you have good support systems and are you self-aware? Those sorts of things can also really do wonders rounding out your sort of picture that is painted for you by your letter writers.
And quick things, Angie, then I know we're going to transition. So, but to answer your other question, I don't think we've really touched on for me and how I approach applications. I always go to a student's personal statement first, and I read your first paragraph. And if you don't get me in your first paragraph, it's like your handshake. I probably don't read the rest of it. So your first paragraph is super key in having it to be strong and unique. Again, as I said earlier, do not start your essays with, I've always wanted to study psychology. Please do not write that. The rule that I give all of my mentees is if there's a sentence like, I've always wanted to study psychology, and you can swap in chemistry, physics, or any other field, and the sentence still makes sense, it's probably not specific enough to tell me why this program, why you. So that first paragraph is really key. Your other side of your question, Dr. Williams mentioned flunching. I actually love group flunching. And so if any of you are nervous, you and your student friends can all put your flunch money together, and you can pay for one group flunch, go with a friend to make it less scary. They pay for the next one. I actually, as a faculty member, really like group flunches with multiple students. And I think it's a very underutilized way of hoarding all your money, especially when you lose your food points toward the end of the semester. So group flunch is key. And the other one, as the transition, as I'm sure Angie wants to get to, is if you're working with grad students or postdocs, you can ask them for a letter. And often they can co-write with the faculty member. They basically ghost write kind of for it, but you still can get a faculty signature on it, which weighs a little more, right, in your applications. But oftentimes students know a grad student TA or something like that better than a faculty member. So that's another pathway you can consider if you're short on letters. So that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Gaither. And we will have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, panelists, for being available and answering questions that are of great interest to the people who are attending this. Is it okay if they route additional questions to you in upcoming weeks? Thank you so much. Well, you all have a pleasant evening, and we are going to transition now to the graduate student panel. We'll take a little bit of a break where no one will say anything, or at least no one will say anything serious. Okay, and then we'll start introductions. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So we are officially starting the second half of this event, and I'm so appreciative for everyone here. So everyone who you see, who isn't just a black box on the screen right now, is a current graduate student in a program at Duke. And so if you all wouldn't mind, panelists, I think the reasonable way to start is just to tell us a little bit about who you are, how long you've been at Duke, how much time you have left, who you work with, and then we can kind of get into areas more, the things that students might want to know, kind of like how you approach decisions and so on about where to apply, et cetera, et cetera. But just to acquaint yourselves with, your training area and where you are in it. Paul, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hope you guys are doing well. Um, I'm a fifth year PhD candidate. I'm in the COG. It started when I started, it was called the Cognitive Neuroscience. I think it's called something else now. Cognition in the brain, maybe. Um, it's a bit of a misnomer because really everything that I do is really social and moral psychology. I do cog neuro stuff too, but it's not nearly as fun as experimental philosophy. No offense to people that are really diehard neuroscience people. Um, I also have my master's in data science from Duke, and I am also concurrently doing my executive MBA at Duke. Um, I teach full time. I'm in Connecticut right now. I teach at my alma mater, Southern Connecticut State University, and I think that covers it for a brief introduction, unless you want something else, Angie.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Olivia, I'm kind of crossing the screen here.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm a third year PhD student in the systems and integrative neuroscience area. And I work in Jenna McHenry's lab using mouse models to study social relationships and how they're represented in the brain.
Thanks. Evan?
Hi, everyone. My name's Evan. I am a fifth year in the cognition area as well. I study auditory neuroscience with Dr. Vieth, and I'm also doing my certificate in college teaching here at Duke as well.
Thank you. Hector?
Hi everyone, my name's Hector. Can you hear me actually? Okay, cool. I'm a first year CNAP student, so I'm in the Cognitive Neuroscience Admitting program. I'm currently doing my first rotation, so that program's a little bit different than maybe some of the other students. I have to rotate around labs, and I'm doing some attention work.
Thanks. Skylar, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Skylar. I'm a third year in social psychology, and I work with Recoil, doing stuff on motivation and self-regulation and how our implicit beliefs affect how we pursue goals.
Thanks. Sid?
Hi everyone, my name is Sid. I am a second year in the clinical program. I work with Dr. David Goldston, and my area is largely youth suicide prevention.
Thank you. Lilly?
Hi everyone, I'm Lilly. I'm a first year in the clinical program, so I just started in August. I work with three advisors, Ahmad Hariri, Terry Moffat, and Avshalom Caspi. Broadly, my work is about lifespan approaches to aging, so how childhood impacts your brain in midlife and beyond. And a lot of my stuff is neuroimaging work, so I have some of the neuroscience flavor.
Thanks. And Colin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kolin. I'm also a first year in the clinical program. I am working with Zach Rosenthal, doing research mostly on misophonia and emotion regulation.
Thanks for giving those introductions. So we have almost all the training areas at Duke represented for at the grad level. But so if people want to turn on their cameras and ask questions, that's great. You can throw questions in the chat. But while we're waiting for that, I guess one question that makes sense to ask is kind of how you knew you were ready to apply to grad school. If anyone wants to chime in.
I can start. I didn't know whether I wanted, do grad school or more studying when I was a senior in college. So I decided to do a post-bac and work for a couple years in a lab and see if I still like doing science. And after doing it for some time, I realized I liked, doing research. I like being in a lab. I like, my job. So that's when I decided to apply.
I can go next because I have a similar experience. Being in the clinical area, there's like so many pathways that you can take. And so I wasn't sure how much research versus practice I wanted to do, which is like the big question in clinical psych. And so I also took about 2.5 years to do a post-bac research position. And that's where I gained like every skill that I think got me into this place. I was a terrible candidate in undergrad, in my opinion. I think I would not have made it. And so that just like brought me so much experience of like what clinical research looks like, which is very different from typical research that you can get involved in as an undergrad. So yeah, I highly recommend a post-bac if you're in the clinical area.
And I'll just add that clinical research often takes longer because I used to do animal work in undergrad, and that was easy to get a foothold in and to sort of like push along within a year or so. But sometimes clinical research can take a longer time, so a postbac would help you get involved in something like that.
Yeah, I'll give a little warning that I talk too much and I swear even more, so I apologize for that, but it's who I am, and that's probably not going to change now that I'm 30. Um, so probably very non-traditional and maybe not similar to most people here, but if it's similar to you, then I'm happy to reach out and talk more with me. Um, I went to the Marine Corps right after high school, and I was like a terrible student. I graduated from my third high school after being expelled from my first two, so I was just like a shitty student. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps because of injuries, I went to undergrad, and I didn't know what to do because no one in my family had been to college. And after like my first semester in college, I had like a midlife crisis, so to speak, and I tried to get out and go back into the military, but they wouldn't take me. So I was ended up talking to a professor and was like, "What do I do?" Blah blah blah. Ended up being great. He was super helpful, and I was like, "How do you get to do this job? It's so cool that you get to like mentor the students and help them figure out what they want to do in their life." And he's like, "Go get your PhD," and I'm like, "What the fuck is a PhD?" Uh, and so I found out at 25 a PhD existed, and then I just kind of dedicated myself to doing research to prepare to do that so I could come back and teach and mentor and kind of help other people. But I think your question is, how did I know I was ready for a PhD? Maybe I don't think anyone by definition is ready because you go to a PhD program to be trained. And if you've already been trained, then you'd have no reason to be in a PhD program. So I think you're ready when you know it's something that you want to do and you're ready to take the licks that come along with it and persevere. But in terms of like technical capabilities and experience, you could always do more and be better prepared, but you'll never be completely ready, I don't think. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's my thoughts on it.
I can expand on what Paul was saying a bit, because like I had applied for PhD programs multiple times, and I thought I was ready just because I was like, that's I want to do. I'm interested in research. I'm interested in being in academia. That's just what I have to do after this. But I didn't realize that I hadn't been adequately trained in order to make that next step. So I was unsure really of what I like the kind of research I wanted to do, like the skills I needed to acquire, and even the skills that I had. And so working after college, kind of, and then being a research assistant, and then even getting a master's degree with a professor that I worked with in undergrad actually helped me prepare myself for like, oh, okay, I actually do want to get a PhD and I want to research this and I want to do this kind of work. Just to expand on what Paul was saying a bit.
So if no one else has anything to contribute on that one, we do have a question in the chat, like what does your typical day or week look like?
I guess it's different for if you're like Paul and I, or if you're a first year, it looks very different. So I guess should a first year start?
I can speak to that. It definitely, I'm sure, looks a lot different for first year, having gotten the chance to speak with some older students, regardless of area. But as a first year, it's a more class heavy workload. The focus is definitely when you first get here on the transition and just making sure, at least for me, it's felt a lot like getting used to being a student again because not everyone was. Certain people like worked in between coming back to grad school, so it was nice from my point of view to be able to focus more on classes. But we do have a number of classes, and it depends on your area which classes you're in. So being in the clinical area, we have slightly more like assigned classes that we have to take when we first get here than in some of the other areas. But the focus is definitely there, and then depending on your individual relationship with your advisor, everything else can kind of build out from the class structure that you have in place.
I guess I can speak to second year. I think I'm the only second year here. Um, and again, it's a clinical perspective, so this only applies to some people, but wildly different than first year. It's a lot of fun. This is the year where you start seeing patients, so you feel like a big girl, and you're still taking classes, you're still doing research, but now you're seeing patients and you're teaching. So I'm having a lot of fun. Every day is different. It really works well with my ADHD. I have a new task each and every day, and I love it. So if you're looking for consistency and a mundane career path. I don't know if this is the best one for you. But I'm really enjoying it.
Olivia, are you the next one up?
Yeah, I'm
And
a third
Skylar?
year. And yeah, I think my days are fairly similar to Sid's, although less class heavy. I'm still TAing now, and one of the biggest things I'm focusing on right now is trying to prepare for my prelim or my MAP, which depending on the university, I think it varies on the specific timing, but for our program, we have to do it by the end of our third year. And so trying to balance collecting data for like forming my hypotheses and also trying to map out exactly what my prelim is going to look like.
Skylar, similar for you?
Yeah, I'm also working towards the same milestone as Olivia. I would say my day is a little bit different though. I do a lot of mentoring. So I have a lab with 6 undergrads that work on me across several projects. And so in the first year, similar to what other people have been saying, lots of classes. You have a little bit more structure than second year. You're a free range PhD student. But I noticed a much bigger shift towards I need to find writing times. And so, especially this year, it's been okay, how do I block my time efficiently where my Fridays are stacked? I'm going from one project to the next, working with RAs. And then I'll have like Tuesdays where I do a bunch of stuff, but then setting whole days aside where it's all focused on writing. And for me, it really helps to do that with someone. So I'll be like, okay, Monday morning, I'm gonna go write with Kirby, another guy in my cohort, so that there's some structure. It's like, okay, I gotta get out of bed and I gotta start the week, and then we're good. But yeah, I really like it. It's wonderful. Um, but yeah, very different than the beginning of the program.
That's great. I think we're up to you, Evan, and Paul. And Paul, you already referenced some of your activities, but Evan, you want to start here?
But yeah, since I'm in my fifth year, I'm at the everything but dissertation point in my PhD career. So like no more teaching, no more classes. It's all just writing, trying to finalize data analysis. I don't even collect data anymore. And I used to I think for my like second, third, and fourth year, a huge chunk of my week was collecting data from EEG, but now I don't anymore. But I mostly set aside time for writing, applying for jobs. That actually takes quite a bit of time in your final year or two if you're like me and you want to do like a faculty teaching position. It takes quite a bit of time. And I also, like Skylar, mentor students. Mentoring students is like the part of this program that I love the most. So even though my advisor really hates me doing it, I still like to advise or like mentor undergraduate students, help them out with their research and their ideas, and helping them do graduation with distinction. I find a lot of joy in that. So I do have 2 students that I am against better judgment and mentoring. So I have a day or two out of the week just to take a big chunk of those days to help them. But most of my day, every day, is writing or writing and then data analysis. And that's it. So it's a lot of computer work, not a lot of getting up and doing stuff, which is unfortunate for me.
Thanks. Hey, Paul, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts. One is that I think you have a lot of autonomy uh, and a lot of flexibility throughout any year of your time, whether you're first year or fifth year. Because even in the first year, when you have the heaviest course load, perhaps it's still lighter than an undergraduate. Um, right, at undergrad, you take 4 to 5 classes a semester. you have tons of tests, tons of homework and busy work and shit like that. That's not really the goal of graduate school classes. And so even if you had the same amount of classes, which you typically don't, there's less busy work and less assignments and exams that you're studying for. So it feels easier, less stressful, maybe, if not easier, but less stressful. Maybe not that word either. It's something less. Um, and besides like classes that are specific times where you can't move them, other than that, you kind of, I guess, depending on your advisor and other commitments, but you kind of do things when you want and when you can. So like, I like to putter in the morning, so I sleep 8 hours. I wake up, I walk my dogs for an hour, I go to the gym maybe for 2 hours, and then I get to work and I still teach and stuff. And so there's plenty of autonomy and you move things around. You kind of have to be self-disciplined and self-guided to get things done. But, you know, if you wanted to take a Wednesday off to go surfing, you could do that if you don't have classes, and then just make up the work on a Saturday if that's cool with you. And so it's a typical week is kind of what you make of it. You could fill it. It could be as empty as you want or as full as you want. There's always other things to do, additional people to mentor, additional projects to do, teaching if you like to do teaching. You could do additional coursework even if it's not required. And so everyone had a great answer, but I think a broader answer is that your typical week is going to look like whatever you want it to look like, and some may be more adaptive than others, but everyone's different, and you have a lot of say over what your graduate school experience looks like broadly.
So I didn't mean to skip over Hector and Lily. I mean, are there any insights from back, kind of circling around to the first year again, that you want to add now that everyone's cycled through?
I think Paul kind of spoke on it. Like, yes, we have probably a fair amount of courses, but there's a lot of flexibility in my time. So my PI is just as long as I get my work done, I can do it whenever I want. So I work at night and I like to sleep in the mornings. I go to class and then I work kind of afternoons, and I might go home, have dinner. I might do something. I might work later and like god awful hours, like 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 to like 2 a.m. just because that's how I work. That's my routine. But for some people in, you know, friends in the program as well, they're morning people and they leave early. So it really depends on the person.
Yeah, and I'll also add that it depends on your advisor too and who you're working with. Because sometimes advisors might say, I want to meet with you every single week at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Wednesdays, and then you got to make that time. But I find that really helpful because I feel like that gives me a solid time of like, okay, I have to have this done by that time, or else I'll have to explain myself, I guess. Not that advisors are not flexible. They're always willing to work with you about, oh, you know, I needed to do just this little thing more, and then I'll be able to do this other thing that you asked me for. But if I didn't have that time, I would never do it. So that's sort of a helpful dynamic that I have going with my advisors. But some advisors I know say like, it's up to you. Whenever you want to meet with me, that's you email me. So just depends. That can sort of change what your day-to-day life looks like, but in general, you have a lot of flexibility. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So a question in the chat, what are the major milestones and how do you prepare yourselves? And maybe, I don't know if one of you could just kind of start and talk about kind of the steps. I know it differs a little bit by area, but what are the things that have to be accomplished in order to successfully get through the program, and about when and all that kind of stuff?
Well, the big one is the prelim, which usually happen. I know I forgot who precisely was going through the prelims now. I think Skylar and Olivia, right? Um, that's usually always like what's brought up as like the big milestone. Like I know Makeba was just here, and she would stress that like that's the hardest thing you do in grad school. And everything after that's fine, which like varies from person to person, but it is a big milestone. Um, and before that, I think in our program we have like the third year talk. I think the third year talk and the first year talk. Like those are like little like checkpoint challenges, but it's mostly the prelim, which is like a big um, like presentation to your committee that you have to form. You have to prove to them that that you're working on these projects. You have this coherent idea, and it's essentially like ramping up into your dissertation. And then in your fifth year, usually fifth or sixth, you actually you submit your dissertation and then you defend it. I know I'm missing. Are there fourth or other first year like milestones that I'm missing? Can anyone help fill in those gaps for me?
That's pretty much it. The only other difference would be for that I can think of is clinical, because we always have to
Right.
be professional. And we just have like an empirical, which is literally just any kind of like, it's typically like a secondary data analysis type thing. But everyone uses it for their first year talk anyway. So, but
But
yeah,
yeah,
it's,
I was gonna say you all have something after you dissertate, right? You have to do like another year.
oh yeah, we can't even graduate after that. We have to do an internship and then come back to graduate after the internship.
Sorry.
Thanks.
So, I don't know if any of you like if one of you would maybe talk about postdocs, that might be useful because that's a milestone that I'm not sure everybody's aware of, or a stepping stone in between, between this and what comes next, perhaps.
Yeah, I got a couple thoughts on the previous thing. So everything
Okay.
was spot on for sure. It obviously depends on the university, right? So we're speaking specifically to Dukes, but generally, I think across most universities, there's some sort of prelim or qualifying exam, and you could really think of it as like a master's thesis or a transition from when you're a student, a PhD student to a PhD candidate, where you're never done learning, but you're done taking coursework and you're done kind of building and proving that you have the foundational knowledge in the field that you're studying, right? The prelim or qualifying exam is really just to show like, hey, I know this area. Not that you've necessarily contributed to it yet, but that you've consumed the knowledge that already exists from other people. And then you typically have to do a dissertation proposal to your committee, which is this is the thing that I would like to do for my dissertation and defend why and outline it, whatever. Presumably they're going to say sounds good and give it its blessing, and then you do that thing, and then regardless of whether it you get significant results or not, whatever the results are, so long as you kind of do what you agreed upon with your committee and you did it well, then you defend. And that's, I think, probably broadly true of all PhD programs. Those kind of three things are the core things, and everything else is just kind of like build you up maybe. And by the time you get to your all these things, you'll have done enough work. Hopefully, if your advisor is good and steers you in the right direction, that they don't really maybe feel like as much of milestones or gatekeepy things as it might seem when you read it online. Like, oh God, that seems scary. Like you've been preparing for this for the couple of years leading up to it, and so I felt like it wasn't. It was a formality and not something to be afraid of. Although other programs may be more gatekeepy, and it's meant to kind of be a haze fest, but that's certainly not Duke's thing. And I think most schools are moving away from the old haze fest sort of thing. When you graduate, um, speaking to the postdoc now, and then Evan, I'm not sure if you're looking for postdocs or not. Um, After you graduate with your PhD, uh, there are a couple routes. You could leave academia, go to industry, which is great. You could get a faculty position right off the board, which is great. Or you could go do a postdoc, which is also great. And there could be two reasons. One is that you just want to learn new skills, all right? So you've done this thing in your PhD, you've developed this kind of body of research, and there's something else that you really just want to spend a couple years on specializing in and becoming kind of credible and increasing your network at a different school with a different professor or at the same university, doesn't really matter, but that you just want to get more training, or learn something new or whatever. And that's great for that. It also could give you time to get more work done, be a little bit more productive, get things that were waiting from your dissertation in the review cycle out, so that when you do apply for either an industry position or a faculty position, you just there's more demonstrated work that's been produced. But you could think of it as like maybe like a residency for medical school or something like that. I'm not sure if it's completely comparable, but it's something to the effect of you finished your degree and now you're doing extra training.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. It has the opportunity to give you more publications. Like if the work in your field just takes a long time, and you just want to, just increase the number of publications that you have to give yourself a better leg up for an academic, like a faculty position. And like you just said, Paul, if you want to diversify as well. diversify either the skills you have or like the people that you're working with. Something I don't, and I'm sorry, Paul, I don't know if you mentioned this, but like for your prelim, you can also master out there. Like technically, you can at Duke, and I know a number of universities as well. That's technically all the work you need for your master's degree, and so you can even apply to just get your master's from Duke and keep going with your PhD. But now you have your master's degree. So if you leave and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, or like I have other job prospects or something like that, at least you have your master's degree in your field. So that's something that people tend to do. I know a few students in my cohort did that. Um, but I am applying to a few postdoc positions. It's not my first choice, but I am currently doing that as well, and it's to diversify the work that I'm doing because I want to do more auditory research.
The other part of that same question in the chat was getting at basically how you prepare yourself for all these milestones. And I feel like some of you hit on this just a little bit, but if there were other comments to add.
I know, Olivia and Skylar, how are you guys preparing? Oh, sorry, Lily, I didn't realize you were about to.
No, that's okay. You guys go. I was going to also answer this question from the perspective of milestones when you're applying to graduate school, but that would come after.
Well, I know it's different for everybody. Um, for me, I think what helped a lot was to be already kicking around ideas early on and testing them out because it is kind of your first time doing something that's non-empirical during the PhD. So first 2 years, you're doing a lot of like, let's design experiments, let's test ideas, but um, a lot of you can either do sort of like a grant proposal, like a NIH type of thing to fund the tail end of your PhD, or you can do more of a integrative narrative review. And I find it really fun and freeing to be able to do that. But uh, going from an idea to an actual paper that's refined and actually adds something to the conversation around the topic you want to do is a long journey of okay, it's too broad, let's rescope, no, readjust. And so I think having an idea and running that by your advisor and getting feedback and sort of having that as like a little side um, thing really helped me because then it turns it from I don't have to just dive in. I've been doing this for a while, so I think that helped me a lot. Um, yeah, but as far as preparation, it's just a lot of work. Um, Managing your time well and um, you'll hear a ton of advice on like try and write every day or stuff along those lines. You got to find your own rhythm. For me, it's not writing every day, but having some sort of pattern that does get you productivity, whether that's a big burst here and there, or it's regular patterns every day, is important. And then I find it very helpful to get feedback from peers, not just from your advisor. You can get a lot of good insights and challenge the ideas before it gets to the point where you've gone too far down that rabbit hole and you should have just left it and focused on something else. So
That's what those third year talks are good for. What
yeah.
you have to do, just speaking in front of your whole cohort, or actually the whole department. Um, Lets you know
Yeah.
if you were. I know when I did mine, some people were like, I don't understand this thing that you were talking about. I was like, oh, and I had to redo that, and that really helped me for my my MAP.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. That's my favorite thing that I take away from like conferences is those questions and conversations go straight into your discussion sections. It's a really great catalyst for that.
I think I guess two other things that I've been doing a lot to sort of prepare for my prelim is the first one is reading a lot. I feel like I definitely did not read enough during my first 2 years. I just don't think I prioritized it, but it's definitely become a big priority for me now. And even rereading like the same papers that I know are particularly relevant to my area, or they use the techniques that I want to apply to like make sure that I understand the main concepts and the big takeaways so that I can sort of form educated hypotheses and ideas and directions for my work. And the other big thing, I think for me, especially being in like a neuroscience field, is like making sure the techniques that I want to propose will actually work in the way that I want them to. For example, if I want to do this imaging technique on a specific brain region, before I can propose it to my committee, I have to make sure that it is actually something that will work, either by doing it myself or finding somebody else that's done it before. And if it is something that works, then making sure it's something that I can do. If this is a technique that I want to propose that I'll use in my own research. So it's been a lot of practicing sort of and learning new wet lab skills, which has been fun, but also learning a lot, which I think is good.
The other thing that I think is really helpful, especially for like preparing for prelim stuff, is kind of on in the same vein of like just reading, like getting acquainted with the literature, but also I'm like I used to hate the breadth requirement that Duke recently like instated, which is basically like pulling from other areas besides your own. But now I'm like, oh my God, this is such a great tool to finally feel like I'm contributing in a novel way to this body of literature that has been just redone and redone and redone. I'm sure everyone feels a a bit like that about their field. And so something that's super basic to someone who's like in developmental, like Erickson's identity theory, like to them, that's like, oh, old news. To me, that has not been used in the context of suicide. And so I'm like taking this super basic theory from way back in the day, bringing it to contemporary like context. And everyone in my pool is like, oh my God, this is so novel. And so I think just like that practice of reading other area of literature to spark your ideas, it makes the load a lot easier than trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again. So that's something I've been trying to practice.
Thanks. Lily, is this time now to talk about milestones ahead of grad school? Is that where you were wanting to go?
Yeah, I think that that might be helpful for this stage that most of the students in the forum are at right now. And it's top of mind since it was happening 12 months ago. I guess the first step is like we've already discussed, figuring out if you want to apply or if you're ready to apply. I agree with, I think Paul said that no one's like ever really ready totally to apply. Um, but that's okay. You just kind of make the jump. I personally did not decide until seriously probably September of last year. I was like thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it. I was also in a post-bac program like Hector had described. So I was definitely on that trajectory, but I wasn't really sure. I didn't really know if it would fit my personality, my skills, my wants for the future. So I want to say that because I feel like some people make it seem like, oh, you have to know since the day you were born that you wanted to do this type of program. You can sort of like adapt as you go. So first step is deciding that you're going to apply. The second step I would say is identifying first of all advisors and then secondarily schools. Why I say that is because of course when you're applying to a PhD program, you're really applying to an individual advisor, or in my case, I have three, but that's a little bit more rare. Rather than I'm applying to Duke, or I'm applying to Ohio State, or I'm applying to different schools. It's unlike undergrad in that way. So you want to identify advisors, and that seemed like an impossible task to me, because how am I supposed to know that this person at Case Western University is doing this specific topic? There's not really a directory that you can do that, but the best way to do it, I would say, is just Google your topic. So let's say lifespan approaches to aging is what I would Google. And then pick a title of a paper that seems interesting to you. So you go on Google Scholar and type in some keywords. And then you can sort of see, okay, they're citing this paper and who's that person? And sometimes it's really old papers, foundational papers that people cite from like 1910 to the 90s. If it's a theory type of paper, but sometimes it's really relevant that, oh, this just happened 5 years ago. And then you can look up that person, Google them, and then see, and it sort of builds off of that in that way. You can see who people collaborate with. Then you'll have a big list of people that you want to that you're interested in working with. The next step is you could reach out to those people or not. Sometimes the main important part is that you should look on their lab website and see. Sometimes professors are really specific and they say, do not reach out to me under any circumstances. Don't reach out to me. I have enough emails. And then they really don't appreciate it. You should take that seriously. If that's on their page, they really don't appreciate it if you do reach out. Most people say, reach out to me, see if I'm taking a student. Lab websites I've found are often not up to date. So sometimes they'll say, yes, I'm taking a student for the 2022-2023 cycle. And then that doesn't really help you. So then in that case, you'd have to reach out to them. Sometimes if you feel more comfortable, you might identify a grad student whose work that you like and say, oh, I'm Lilly, I'm a prospective student. I see that you're working on XYZ in this lab. I'm interested in this lab. Do you know if your advisor is taking students? That's another route for you. You don't have to reach out to people. Sometimes people consider that as like a barrier that, oh, if Lilly didn't email me, her application's out. But you'll find that it's so idiosyncratic that everybody does things so differently. It's nearly impossible to know, like, oh, if I email Hector, he's really going to like it, versus if I email Lilly, she's going to throw out my email. You never know. And of course, professors are people, so sometimes it might get lost. You might want to check back in. And then, yeah, the next step is writing the application, I would say. Sometimes professors say, or you can ask in your email, but only ask it if you mean it, that I want to meet with you because I'm interested in XYZ before applications. I find that most people say, I'm not going to meet with you prior because I'm trying to keep it fair, that you don't want to like a pre-interview. But some people say, yeah, I'd love to meet with you. Come to that meeting with questions. You can talk to them. Next step is actually writing your application. So I had like a big Google folder, and I hope this is helpful. I'm sort of rambling now, but I had a big Google folder of like, okay, I'm applying to this school, this school, this school, this school. And then I would open the folder and it would have it. I have 3 essays for Duke. It's this one, this one, this one, and the requirements for that. Each school has different stuff, but you want to make sure that you write your personal statement or your research statement to be tailored to that lab in particular. So I didn't apply to all labs that were about lifespan perspectives on aging. It's pretty hard to get that close of a niche. So some labs I applied to were about like childhood in particular. And so then I would tweak my research statement to be about that. You want it to be as applicable. I think when I entered the Zoom meeting, the faculty members who were on were talking about we want to see a fit. And I think that is really true. But I will say that I had no clinical experience whatsoever, zero, before going into this program. I worked with mice as an undergrad. I worked with monkeys in between, and then I worked with humans, but all healthy adults, no clinical applications. But I did a lot of volunteering work in clinical research field. So you just have to like, the way I pitched it is I'm actually better than a candidate who's had a whole long thing of clinical stuff, because I can pull from mouse stuff, I can pull from monkey stuff, I can pull from this neuroimaging stuff. So you just have to play to your strengths. Don't feel like, oh, dang it, like I did a bunch of clinical research in adults and now I want to apply to a child lab. That's great. Pitch it as you've actually never seen anyone like me before, and I could be the thing that you need for your lab. Then you'll submit all your applications and hopefully have a good holiday season. And then people will reach out to you about interviews. Sometimes people do pre-interviews, and interviews beyond that, admitted students day, things like that. But that's the general outline of how it goes. And the biggest challenge is just getting down on the volume of that stuff you have to write. I find having a lot of people read your stuff can be helpful. Identifying mentors, maybe you had a mentor in your postbac, or a mentor in undergrad, or even so my family doesn't do anything like this. They don't do science at all, known as PhD. But sometimes I would say, here, read this. Does it make sense? And that can be helpful too. Yeah, I hope that helps.
That's great. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, Lily, that was excellent. One thing that I would mention is you should consider applying for the National Science Foundation Fellowship while you're applying for grad school. It's really good practice and a lot of it funnels right into your personal statements and your research statements. And it's a free shot when you're an undergrad. So you'll get feedback on your application. You can apply again once you're a grad student and take that feedback, make it better. And even if it doesn't work out, people love to see that you're chasing funding. So just doing it is great. So um, put out that on your radar.
Dr. Gaither actually made a comment that they were not accepting clinical applications anymore, right? So, but for other areas, it's still a go. Okay.
I'm
Um,
also gonna, oh, sorry, go
oh,
ahead, Hector.
you're good. I'm also gonna add that if you're interested in kind of neuro programs, usually you don't have to know what advisor specifically you have to apply for because they're more umbrella. So that worked for me because I didn't know who I wanted to work with, and choosing, someone within the literature, or I want to work with this guy or this person, was really, really hard for me and impossible. I could never decide up till like the last moment. So I applied to umbrella programs. So, you apply because you want to do cognitive neuroscience, or you want to do this type of psychology, but I don't know who I want to do it with, and I don't know the specifics, but I'm gonna rotate around and decide while I'm there. So stuff like that is available.
Thank you, Hector. Yeah, that's good for students to know.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to add is that if I was in this panel my senior year or wherever you are in your undergrad career, I would have no idea what we mean by a postbac. So I was just going to explain what that means. A postbac, I'm going to drop a link to. The second link is a training program at the National Institutes of Health. And so there's a bunch of different institutes. There's one on aging, mental health, uh, there's tons. And the main campus is in Bethesda, Maryland, outside of DC. And I did that program, so did Hector and Kolin. And that one's a great one. It's 2 years funded. You get paid a stipend to be there. So it's like you're working a job. I don't know the status of it because things are changing with the new administration. I think it's still going on, but you can look into that. So that's an example of one to do at a research institution. You can also do one through a college. And let's say you identified, I'm not ready to apply to grad school yet, but I identified that I really want to work with Lilly at this university, and so I'm going to email them and say, "Oh, do you have spots for a research assistant?" Research assistant is almost synonymous with postbac. That's basically the same thing. Or a lab manager is another role that's sort of a postbac role. And what you do in those roles is you manage everything in the lab, comes in the name, but like you set up appointments, or yeah, you just help the lab flow, and you can get on papers that way. So there's a lot of different post-bac opportunities that you can do, but those are just some examples. So it's basically like a job after undergrad, in the pursuit of a graduate degree.
So I'd like to remind the attendees that we're down to about the last 10 minutes of this panel. And so if you have questions for our panelists, it'd be lovely to hear from.
Yeah, I have one quick question. Well, some of you, this is more recent than others, but if you could go back to when you were like a senior undergrad, like what do you wish you had known or wish that someone had told you that you feel like would be helpful?
I can go on that one because that one's easy for me and it's relatively brief. I would just say trust yourself. Building off of what's already been said by multiple people on the panel, you're always more ready than you think. The imposter phenomenon or syndrome, however it's referred to now, is very real at each step. Like looking back, I would have, if talking to my previous self, I never felt like I was in the same place as everybody else in terms of being ready to be there. Somehow I kept making it to the next step. So I would just tell, my previous self to trust yourself in that you're more ready than you think, just to follow whatever you're passionate about. And as Liz said, it's often about how you frame things. So just try and yeah, follow what you're passionate about and trust yourself. It'll probably be okay.
I would also add to kind of like, I don't know, like enjoy that time in your life because you're at like a fork in the road where you can explore so many different options before you dive into something quickly and then you're kind of stuck in a certain place, which you never truly are. But um like have fun with it. Like for me, the reason why I needed the post back is I thought I was going to go into criminal justice and I applied for the FBI. I got an interview and they tried to hook me up to a polygraph machine. And I was like, I think I care about science. So there's some experiences that I don't want you to lose out on either by pigeonholing yourself. I lived in my parents' basement for far too long, but that's okay if you need to do that to get by. So like give yourself grace, especially now. Like getting into graduate programs is a lot harder now than it used to be. And with funding the way it is, it's just an unfair situation for a lot of people. So give yourself grace, give yourself time, and no move is truly ever a permanent move. And just remind yourself of that and enjoy the process as much as you can.
I would say just get as much technical experience as you can. I mean, in addition with everything everyone else said so far. But like applying to like psychology and neuroscience programs, like knowing how to program is extremely beneficial, and it costs nothing just to like learn how to do that. Like you can download R and follow a tutorial like very easily. And you don't have to have like a degree in it to put it on your resume, right? When you're applying, and people are gonna want to see those skills. If it's even like tangentially related to the kind of work that you're interested in, I would say do as much as you can to just like try to pack your resume with like, yeah, I know MATLAB, I know R, I know how to use this equipment. Even if I just volunteered in this lab for a few months, like I know how to use this equipment. I've done it before. And it'll make you look a whole lot better and more competitive. Like it's already been said, it's harder than ever to get, I don't know if it's harder than ever to get to these programs, but it was very hard when I did it, and that was a long time ago. So I can only assume it's gotten harder. So just the more technical skills you just put under your belt, the better you're going to look, and it's going to be, that much easier to get into a good program.
I would say also, I like what everyone said. To not compare yourself to your peers in senior year. I feel like that was a big thing for me that I was really worried that, oh, this person's applying to graduate school, med school, law school straight out of undergrad, and I need to be doing that. Or this person's a consultant now, and I need to be doing that. Or, making X money or Y money. So try to keep your as best as possible your sights on what's right for you. And I really like what Sid said that sometimes you can't know until you're actually in her example, sitting in the FBI chair and having the polygraph thing being set up to you. In my case, it was until I actually knew I was face to face with a monkey and I decided, oh, yeah, I can't do primate research. So that stuff is like so important and you really can never know until you're actually doing it. And that's all part of the process. And the second thing is to not project too far ahead. I was trying to set up, okay, if I do this postback, then I can apply in this certain time, and then I'll go to this, you can never know where things will take you or go. And it just is wasting your time to try to project too far in advance. So I struggle with that still with both things to keep your sights on whatever you're doing individually and to not plan too far in advance, but try your best to do those things.
And volunteer in a lab if you haven't. That'll get you the experience to be like, oh, I don't want to do this, or I do want to do this. Even if you're a senior, try to volunteer with any lab on campus that you think is remotely interesting and you haven't volunteered yet. Do it right now.
Oh, Catherine.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Um, how what are some ways you can check if you have the right people fit with the advisors or labs you're considering?
It's a good question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lily.
Oh, you can go first. You got that.
Um, I'll say that it's impossible to know for sure unless you've already actually worked with them. So if you worked with someone at Duke, then you probably know whether or not you're a good fit and you like their mentorship style, you like how their lab is done, you like the culture, or if you do a post back, or if you do a lab manager, like unless you actually have that, if you're just looking online and reaching out to people, I mean, you could get a sense, you could get some signal. Um, Most people are going to be on their best behavior, and if they're not, then that's a for sure sign that they're probably not a person that you want to work with if they can't even like put on a show and pretend to be super nice when you like reach out to them. Um, that being said, many people that you won't click with will seem very nice via email or doing a Zoom call, even if they do, because they're incentivized to get as many strong applicants as possible. So they're not going to try to push too many people away, even if they know you're not necessarily the right fit. They still want as many people as possible to apply for them. Um, that being said, so the best thing is to get actual work experience with them. Obviously, that's a bottleneck for some people. It's just not possible. Uh, Reach out to the PI potentially. Look at their online presence. Often these academics just love to talk, whether it's in person or on social media. They do way more than they probably should. So check their X or their Blue Sky or LinkedIn, or whatever, and you could probably get a sense for the type of human beings that they are, and see if it jives with who you are or not. Another thing is to just reach out to some grad students if you feel comfortable and ask for a candid evaluation. Be like, just, I'm interested in this. I just want your like real opinion, off the record. What do you like or not like about being in this space, the lab level, but also maybe in the department level? And again, if they're good people, then they'll give you good information. If they're not willing to share that with you, if they ignore you, doesn't mean they're a bad person. They may just be busy or miss it. But if they just say, no, I don't care to do it, then you probably have your answer. That's my 2 cents on it.
If the grad students are in hell, they'll let you know during the interview. I've seen it happen.
Speaking to that, you can also email the grad students to see if they're in hell or heaven, whatever. And then they can tell you, they're like, don't go here, just go somewhere else. Or, they're really nice. I had interviews, like I reached out to people and I had interviews where mid-interview, we both said, I don't think this is good for us. Like, this is not going to work out. So like, it happens, like personalities, don't mix, or maybe I'm not interested in their research as I thought I was. So, stuff like that.
So all this is great. I know we're very close to time. I guess I want to make my pitch about finding a place where you have at least one possible mentor. I mean, you want to have at least a couple people that you feel like you can do work with. I mean, I feel like that's fairly standard advice. Did you all have that mindset when you were applying?
Yeah, I remember being confused that you can sometimes list more than one faculty member, and that can sometimes get you in a tricky spot. Like, let's say I listed someone who does OCDC or OCD work versus like I don't know, Alzheimer's work. Those could be similar, but they could be really different. And it makes you sort of seem like, oh, she doesn't really know what she wants. Versus if you have two people who do OCD work and you say, oh, I see that I fit with this person in this way, and I also see that I could fit with this person in this way, you could be fine. And then you have maybe double the chance. So that I found confusing, but yeah, at least you should have at least one person that you can identify and say that my experience or what I want to do in the future matches with them in this way.
And I would just quickly say definitely try to see if there's multiple people that you can at least tangentially see that you're interested in working with, because my current mentor advisor is actually wasn't the primary person I put on my application, but I listed multiple people. And then he saw my application and saw that I listed him and reached out so we could talk more. And then after getting to talk with him more, I realized, oh, okay, this actually does fit better than the person I initially put as my primary on my application. So just definitely list people, even if it kind of seems like, ah, maybe it's a stretch, it could kind of work. You never know what happens. So definitely just list as many people as you, or not as many people, but the most like potentially matching people, put multiple.
Yeah, I want to echo Colin's experience. Exactly what happened to me. The only reason I'm at Duke is because someone who wasn't my first choice was like, yeah, I know your advisor from like undergrad and masters. Like, I'm interested in what you did there, so come work with me. That's the only reason I'm here. So that's it's advantageous.
Well, we are at 8:32, and thank you, panelists, for being willing to give your time to questions tonight and give your honest assessment of your experience and things for people to look out for as they're approaching grad school application. But are you all right with being contacted perhaps by students who are either here tonight or will be seeing this recording eventually? Thank you so much. So thanks again for participating, and everyone have a really good night.